recruitment manager at the University of Law. My camera is currently off because I am going to be working across 3 screens to make sure I can get the presentation across to you and also see what you might type in the chat. I am really seeking some interactivity. This talk has been set up to be very interactive. We want your ideas. Whatever you think, typed into the chat box throughout where possible. It is built around that sort of thing as well. So if you have any questions as you go along, I'm going to keep an eye on the chats as well. Miss Lowe might also put in that something's going on as well. But I'm here to talk to you about careers in law, and that, for our angle, is a wide area, a very wide area. We are going to look into a deeper bit of a dive into solicitors and barristers and those sort of areas. Oh, you can still see me on the camera. That's great. Brilliant. Thank you all. If my head does turn around, let me know because I'm across several screens. But yes, we're going to look at solicitor route, barrister route. A lot of you will use the phrase lawyer, which is actually an Americanization of the word, really. We don't really have what you call lawyers, as it were. We have solicitors and barristers in other areas as well. So we're going to go through all of those as well. What you will see on the slides is a few options now to first of all, if you do want some more information about what we're doing, to be notified of events, competitions, extra experience, and anything you want to know about degrees, I really recommend scanning that quickly on your phone. You can fill the form in as we go along. I will show this again at the end, just to get some more information about what we do, how we do it, and if you are thinking of law, we are the deep dive for that. I've worked at 6 institutions throughout my career, and most of them have done law. 5 out of 6 have done law as a degree, but once you get to law, you realise that it's a different layer of law. They've trained more solicitors and barristers than anyone else. They have set up more and more people going into this industry, be it the police, be it criminologists, be it solicitors, barristers, pro bono. So feel free to scan that, but we'll just move on to the next one. So why study at the University of Law is something which I want to touch on to start with. Over 99% of our LLB tutors have been qualified solicitors or barristers, or some of them still are. So we really do have a real depth of knowledge of what's going on in those degree titles. I've worked with some fantastic lecturers at other universities who are great at what they teach, but actually hadn't really lived it as much as ours have. And we do get to hear those real life experiences of what they do as well. Another difference of ours is a lot of time we get people run to us at fairs and go, who are the University of Law? Where are you based? And if you look at that bottom left one there, we're across the country. We're trying to be anywhere where there's a major law area. So I live in the Birmingham campus, which is in the Jewellery Quarter. But across the country, we have offices for undergraduate study at Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds, Nottingham, Bristol, and London. And we also have an online campus as well. If you do the normal LLB law degree with us, you actually can move between campuses each year. So you could start and do a year in Birmingham, where it's got a lower cost of living. And then if your final year, you decide you've got to be in London in order to go and get that lived in City Mile, Magic Circle, top 5 companies feeling, you can. You can move to our lovely Bloomsbury campus by Euston Station. We were very proud to be in top 10 for teaching for the National Student Survey as well. We have experts career service, but I have to be totally brutally honest here. Every uni I've worked at's had a great careers team. Careers teams have always been really good as well. Our law degrees will help you develop your skills in critical thinking, advocacy, negotiation, analysis, strategy, and these are all core skills, not just in law and in the wider laws area, but whatever you choose to do next. And I think that's really important to think about, especially for the people in year 12. I know we might have some year 13s here as well, but especially year 12, do not worry about your degree title too much. Obviously, do something you love, but it can take you in so many different areas as well. So what we're going to go through today. Sorry, I'm just trying to move on my screen onto the computer. We're going to look at the life cycle of crime. We're going to look at legal careers. We're going to look at criminology in action. We're going to look at policing. Now, criminology and law, to me, are 2 sides of a coin. One is what is the law? The other one is why are they doing what they do? Be that psychologically, sociologically. Psychologically, people might be irrational and do crime. Sociologically, they might be forced into it, be it by their family, their friends, by gangs, all these sort of areas. Sorry, yeah, Georgia, how can you watch the recording of this webinar? I'm sure one of the team from King Ed's will let you know, but it is going to be recorded. It is currently being recorded, so obviously, yes, there'll be a chance to watch it back, I'm sure. But yeah, we're going to go through these areas bit by bit. So, the first part we want to talk about, and I'm sorry, I'm just trying to do this over two mouses, so I'm just getting used to it, is we want to look at this session and we want to look at the focus on potential careers roles across the whole criminal justice system. A very simplified sort of cycle of crime would have the following features that you might see there. Um, and my screen is now jumping ahead one, so give me a moment. Give me a sec. Unfortunately, some of the animation has gone a bit wonky on me there, so bear with me. But across these, you would see something like the bottom left there being a crime or type of crime being committed. Next up, you see the handcuffs. That represents usually there'll be arrests. In the middle there, there'll be trials and the court system itself. In number four, which is the gate there, there'll be sentencing, sentence guys, prison systems as well. At the bottom right there, you might see appeals and public reviews of criminal justice. At each stage, there are a variety of careers involved. And so we're going to look at all those as we go through. So, what sort of things might we see on this wonderful animation that keeps jumping for us? So, we might see things like a duty solicitor. And this is the first point of call. If you are a solicitor, you might go to the police station or wherever they are being found or arrested and actually talk to them about that and be a duty solicitor as well. Next to that, you might have your defence and your prosecution. That's where the barristers come in. And you'll see from the little logo we're using, one side means solicitor, that's the tied side, and the other side's got the wig on, and that is the barrister side of things. And we're going to go through their differences bit by bit in this talk as well. As we go through a bit more, there might be the sentencing, the hearings, the bails, the prison locating. And this could be a cross of people. It could be private or public solicitors, depending on court. It could be different jobs in those areas as well. And on top of that, there could be other people working in appeals. So there's a whole range of people who could be working throughout this whole cycle of law as we go through it. So what types of lawyers and solicitors do we have? Now, the first one really are barristers, and we're going to go through each bit by bit. But first of all, I'll say that barristers and sisters really often work closely together, but they have very distinct differences between the two roles. Understand how each role involves is the first step of deciding which career might be best for you. At Uni Law, we use the analogy of the NHS. If you were to be in a crime or a victim of crime, the first person you would go and see is your solicitor. A bit like if you have an injury or you're ill, the first person you go and see is your GP. They generally have a wide knowledge, although they probably have a certain area of practice, and they're the first port of call. Now, if your GP was to say to you, I'm not too sure what to do with this, we need to push this further, and you'd end up at hospital seeing a specialist to scan your body in some way, shape, or form, that's where, in our eyes, the analogy works with a barrister. A barrister is the sort of person who will look after you. There'll be specialists. They'll be the ones doing the cases for you. They'll be representing you in the way they are as well. There can be crossovers between the roles. For example, solicitors may be able to present their clients in court if they're granted rights of audience. However, barristers can work at much higher levels of court than solicitors. The training you need to do usually varies, but most people who are looking at this are obviously on the law pathway, might be thinking of doing the LLB law degree. And that is the most direct route into both solicitor work training and barrister training, the LLB. But you can do pretty much any degree and still go on and be a solicitor or barrister. You can do absolutely anything, actually. I have a friend who I used to work with at another university. I used to manage him. One day he had an epiphany that he wanted to be a barrister. He actually had done sports at Loughborough as a degree. And in his spare time, while still working in a similar role to me now, he has done a postgraduate diploma, which is a conversion course. He's then gone and done his barrister training for a weekend. And from February, he will be doing his pupillage, which is part of being a barrister, and it's sort of your work experience alongside a barrister. So there's many different ways in. The LLB is the most common, though. But when we look at barristers, they are specialists. To give you an idea of how specialist, in this country we have about 260,000 solicitors. There's only about 16,000 barristers. So that sort of gives you the numbers there. They're the people who will look after you in court. They're actually self-employed, which is something I learned when I come to you, I didn't know before. So they're self-employed and they look after cases and earn case by case and work in chambers. So again, very different to a solicitor who's salaried and has a permanent office usually. They use the legal work carried out by solicitors to prepare for the trial or hearing. So the solicitors start with it, and then they pass on their notes to these people. And these are the ones who famously, if you ever watch anything in courts in Britain, they're the ones with the gowns and the wigs, standing, holding the lapels, asking questions. Actually, you don't have to wear the wigs anymore, but actually, most of the time, most barristers do. They feel like it's something they've earned over time. The other side of this coin is our solicitors. These still obviously still provide specialist legal advice, but it's generally a little bit wider. They're often the first point of contact, be that to the person who's committed the crime or alleged to commit the crime, or the victim. They're usually employed by a firm or organisation and work in set offices. They can cover a range of legal practice areas, or they might work in specialist areas. We, on the road, as I'm out and about, talking to people about the law as an option, I often get at big fairs, careers fairs, UCAS fairs, students saying, I want to do criminal law or I want to do family law. And you know what? That's absolutely fine that you've got an idea what you want to do. Fantastic. But actually, when you do a law degree with us or most universities, an LLB law degree, you will study every type of law over the first year to a year and a half. What I call the pillars of law, and or the spider web of law as well. So you got to learn a bit of everything before you know what you want to specialise in down the line. And trust me, it's fine not to know what you want to study. If you know what type of law, I'll give you a 50-50 bet that you might change your mind at some point, because that happens. People come in and they think they want to do family law, for example, and by their third year, they're like, I want to do copyright law. I see it all the time. But these are the first point of contact. They're employed by a firm, as I said, and they work mostly outside of court. They might pop in to see cases, but if they do pop in, it'd be very business attire sort of situation. Now, for the next part of this talks, we're going to go over some sort of law in action cases that go on. The first one we're going to talk about is a person called Amar and whether you think they should be prosecuted and charged. This is where I'm going to ask you to type in the chat box and give me some answers if you can as well. So this is from May 2021. A person, 18-year-old, called Omar Mumesh, was with his friends, and one was walking up a down escalator in Derby City Centre's shopping centre. So they were trying to walk the wrong way up an escalator. An old guy, 82, Dennis Clark, sorry, not 82 years old, I shouldn't have said that, but Dennis Clark, 82, confronted him about this. A security guard intervened, and Omar and his friends were thrown out of the centre. Mr. Clark went on his way and was on his way to the bus station, where Omar and his friends saw him and followed him. At the bus station, there was a further confrontation, initiated by the three young people, during which Omar punched Mr. Clark, causing him to fall to the floor. Mr. Clark fractured his skull in the fall and died 9 days later as a result of his injuries. So, the first thing I want you to type in the box, if you can, and have a little guess for me between yourselves, is what area of law do you think this case might fall into? Do you have an idea what area of law it might fall into? So, I'm going to keep an eye on the chat. Any ideas welcome. Don't be shy. If you get it wrong, that's fine. Getting things wrong is perfect in this life because you learn from them, a bit like Batman. Faye has come in early doors and has gone criminal. Harry's followed up. That's it. We're all getting, that's it. That's 3 in a row now. Anyone else want to try another one just in case? Oh, look at this. You're all answering. Thank you very much for that, because it's a very interactive talk and I was worried everyone might be quiet with it being online. But you're right. This is criminal law. Now, if Omar was prosecuted and charged, what do you think he should be charged with? Does anyone have a guess at that from this case? Should I have a drink at this point? Okay, Charlotte, you've come in with manslaughter. Is anyone other takers for anything else that might want to sort of look at in this area? Okay, well, so we're going to go manslaughter, and guess what? Yes, manslaughter makes perfect sense. So how would a solicitor and/or a barrister be involved in this case? So we have a bit of a write-up here. When Amar fled the bus station, he was arrested within minutes. To prosecute a case of manslaughter, the Crown Prosecution Service must be satisfied there is sufficient evidence that the victim's death was caused by an unlawful act on behalf of the defendant. In this instance, Omar claimed he had acted in self-defence. With the public CCTV footage from the incident available, though, and the events leading up to it, the CPS was able to present the case that showed Omar had become aggressive towards Mr. Clark at the bus station. The CPS presented this evidence taken from the phones belonging to the defendant and his friends to show their behaviour towards Mr. Clark. So actually, they'd recorded this as well. Evidence from eyewitnesses also made the sequence of events at the bus station very clear, with the group surrounding the victim and the defendant throwing the punch. More CCTV evidence also showed that his demeanour changed after he left the market, becoming more aggressive at the bus station after he had ample opportunity to remove himself and not get involved. So, in this case, he was charged with manslaughter and found guilty by a jury at Derby Crown Court in July 2023. That gives you an idea of the timescales here. Obviously, this started in 2021. This weren't resolved till 2023. And he was sentenced to 2 years youth custody. Andrew Baxter from the CPS said Dennis Clark's tragic death was a result of this young person's intimidating and aggressive behaviour, refusing to back down and not knowing when to walk away. Mr. Clark was within his rights to challenge the behaviour and had then gone about his business, assuming the incident was concluded. Omar even, chose to confront him at the bus station, behaving in an aggressive and intimidating way to a man in his 80s who posed no threat. He then threw a punch which led to the death of an elderly and innocent man, and a family grieving a much-loved family member and respected member of the community. So you might have had multiple lawyers involved in this case. You might have had a defence solicitor when it got to the police station, solicitors who worked for the CPS prosecuting, and at the day you would have had barristers obviously on both sides, but you would have been presenting to the defendant and the prosecution in the Crown Court. So that's case number 1 we're going to go through today. Let's look at case number 2 about a Mr. Barton. So I'm just going to pull up the information on this one. So this case is about a property developer. His name is Mr. Barton, and he made a verbal agreement with a company called Fox Pace. The deal was that if Mr. Barton found a buyer for a property owned by them, Fox Pace, it was called Nash House, and it sold for £6.5 million, he would get £1.2 million. However, the property ended up selling for £6 million, and Fox Pace said they didn't owe anything to Mr. Barton. So, again, that's setting the scene there. So, first of all, in the chat again, what sort of area of law do you think this case falls into? Does anyone want to have a guess in there? Harry was in there quicker than I thought I said it with contracts, so well done, Harry. Anyone else want to go against that? Have any ideas otherwise? Gonna give it a minute, see if anyone's typing. Okay, Liam's got to be contract and maybe tort. Interesting, like it. Any other takers? Well, you're both right. It is contract. It might touch on tort. That's a whole wider area and a deeper rabbit hole. I think we could examine that for far too long, but contract is the area we're going to keep this aligned to for now. So what type of lawyers would be used within this case? Anyone got any ideas what sort of lawyers, the Americanization of the word, but overall, who would be involved in this sort of case? What do you think? As I said, all answers are fine. There is no such thing as a wrong answer. Does anyone want to put any more info? Corporate, okay. Corporate and contract lawyers, okay. Yeah. Corporate, yeah. So yes, corporate would be totally correct. Commercial could fall into that area as well, yes. But it would probably be corporate solicitors to begin with from both sides, and then obviously barristers for the court who will then take on the case further forward as well. Right. This is a big one because usually we can do this in a room and talk about it, but I'm going to try and do it in the chat anyway. Do you agree with what Fox Pace did, or do you think Mr. Barton should get some compensation for selling the property? What are people's thoughts? Let me know in the chat while I just briefly have a bit of water. I'm going to give this obviously a couple more seconds than I would usually, because you've got to type away a little bit there. But what do people think? Fox Pace were right, or Fox Pace should pay some money? There we go. Charlotte's coming with morally he should, but it was a verbal agreement, so it's not legally binding. Harry's also gone further with there's no evidence of a contract since it's not in writing, so he's not entitled to anything. Interesting take there, Harry. Actually, you can enter into verbal contracts all the time. Example of a verbal contract would be if your friend said, "I'll give you £5 to walk my dog," and you said yes. That is a verbal contract. So that is a bit of a blurred line there, actually, Harry. Any other takers on what people want to add? So I'll go further on what happened next. So Fox Pacey's position was that Mr. Barton was owed nothing as Nash House was sold for less than the amount specified. Mr. Barton then sued. Was he entitled to any reasonable remuneration in these circumstances? Well, in the Supreme Court, this got all the way to the Supreme Court, a majority of 3-2 agreed with Fox Pace, saying Mr. Barton wasn't entitled to any money. So that was a split decision. So it's 3-2. So that's interesting. The reason was the payment of 1.2 was only to happen if the property sold for the 6.5, and they couldn't assume there were any. And there was no promise to pay him anything if it sold for less, nor could there be any applied term. The court also said they couldn't assume that were there any extra terms that hadn't been clearly applied on. So yes, verbally, that probably didn't help him. He probably, as Harry put there, it's verbally, there's no evidence. He should have really followed things up with a bit of a type up about that and tried to put it in writing, shouldn't he? But this case illustrates the general tradition in English contract law, which prizes certainty and party autonomy over judicial intervention. Though the results may seem stark, this is a lesson in the value of appropriately comprehensive express terms. AKA, you must always make sure to include all the details and conditions in your agreements. So again, I personally would have said if I sell it for any less, I want half of that, should we say. And that should have been the sort of thing they looked at, how much they would have got along the way as well. Right, we're going to go on to one more case now. Spoiled views, okay? So spoiled views, and that image there is a part image of it. We don't have a very over-the-top good image, but this is about the Tate Modern. Now, Tate Modern opened an extension in 2016 called the Bavlatnik Building. The Bavlatnik Building is 10 stories high, and its on its top floor has a viewing platform which offers panoramic views of London. Luxury flats called Neo Bankside are directly opposite the viewing platform, and they have glass walls. The owners complained of being subject to scrutiny by visitors to the Tate Modern as they can see directly into the flats. Okay, so you can imagine that you own a flat, someone builds a building opposite that has a viewing platform that views directly into your house. How would you feel? Personally, I'd be slightly peeved off as well. So what type of law do you think this case falls into? So this case, obviously, are they right to sue? What sort of law do you think this one falls into? Any ideas from anyone on the chat? Property, okay. Any other takers? Anyone else want to try? Property's not quite right. It could fall under the bracket of property in this type of law. So it's actually tort law. Building regs, again, would fall into these sort of things. How on earth did they get permission? Is a really good question. But yeah, tort law is actually the one we're going for, the law of tort. So again, what type of lawyer will work on these cases? I'm not going to ask that one again. We've done that one earlier. It's going to be both solicitors and barristers at certain points. What sort of case could the residents put forward? Any ideas what the case would be called if they put it forward? Just waiting in the chat if anyone's got any ideas. Okay, I think no one does. So actually, the case would be under private nuisance. That's when someone's use of their property unduly interferes with others' use or enjoyment of their own properties. So private nuisance. I think there was a famous case a few years back between Robbie Williams and Jimmy Page about private nuisance because I think Robbie was trying to build an underground gym and swimming pool that was affecting the foundations of Jimmy Page's house next door. So again, I think that was a famous private nuisance court case recently. Residents said that visitors would wave, make gestures, and take pictures, which were sometimes posted on social media. They argue that the use of Tate's walkway in this manner unreasonably interfered with their enjoyment of their flats, so as to be a nuisance. They also allege that the use of the walkway infringed their privacy rights, conferred by Article 8 of the European Convention for the Protection of Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms. The claimants sought an injunction requiring Tate to close, or at any rate obscure, the whole southern side of the walkway and half the western side, both of which allowed views of their actual flats. The UK Supreme Court actually sided with the residents, ruling that the viewing platform did indeed constitute a private nuisance. The court decided that the continuous observation from the platform was an invasion of privacy and affected the residents' enjoyment of their properties. The case underscored that even non-physical intrusion could be considered a nuisance if it slightly interferes with the use and enjoyment of someone's home. So they did in the end actually get their way, and that was then closed off. So that was just a few cases to go through with yourselves. So I personally, I'm not the greatest fan of this actual layout. You can actually, when you talk to us or go online, get our sort of postgraduate sort of guides that actually show it a lot easier than this about how you can be a solicitor or barrister. But I'll try and guide you through this online now. So the first thing to really think about is what sort of degree you want to do after you finish your A-levels, BTECs, whatever you're going to study. And I think the big thing to think about here is the direct route you'll see on these things here is doing an LLB degree. The LLB means something in Latin, and given I'm a Brummie and I can't say buzz properly, I'm not going to try and pronounce it for you right now. But LLB accredits you through to go the more direct way. Now, there are non-law degrees out there you can do as well. As I said earlier, I have a friend who did sport and went on to be a barrister. We find a lot of solicitors firms actually really like people who have done history, believe it or not, as a degree. Something about the research skills involved with history helps with being a solicitor down the line. That's just some feedback we've had. But obviously, LLB is the most direct way. If you do a non-law degree, you can do a multitude of different ways to get to the degree. The most common is what we call a PGDL, which is a postgraduate study, sort of 2/3 of a master's. People pay for that themselves, then move on to do the master's study in the court case, in the area they want to go into, sorry, be it solicitor area or barrister area. But there's other options out there as well. There's a whole massive list you can see on our website. But ultimately, if you want to be a barrister, you've got to do the bar practice course with us at postgraduate. That's about a year in length if you do the master's version. And after that, you have to get a thing called pupillage, which I mentioned earlier, which my mate Mark is currently just attained, is off to get. You have to do a year with a barrister, 6 months shadowing and 6 months helping them, and they sign you off to be a barrister down the line. To be a solicitor these days, you've got to pass 2 exams called SQE1 and SQE2. These are now set by the government for the last 3 years. They look after themselves. You have to pay for them separately to the degree. And in theory, once you do an LLB degree or your postgraduate study, you could go for those exams without actually studying anything at all. I wouldn't recommend it. My colleague Sam says it's a bit like trying to pass a driving test without ever being in a car. They are difficult exams. The SQE1 uses best answer multiple choice. So you'll get 4 answers to every question. You've got a minute to answer it. And actually 3 of the answers can be right, but someone has decided which is the right answer. It's very sort of high skilled exams to get you through that as well. Alongside those 2 exams, you've got to get 2 years qualifying work experience. But I suppose the big point for you right now is to think about your next step. And that next step, if you are thinking of going towards the solicitor and barrister route and wanting to do law, would be an LLB law degree. If you do another degree, though, the routes are still open to you. So do not overly worry about that, especially using year 12 who are still thinking about it. So, going further into the talk a little bit now, we are going to look at other areas that pop up. So, some of the roles which you might look at around the system here. And again, my wonderful slides are not shown in the right order, but that's okay. So, you have some roles which look at the current justice system and advocate change, and some that work in different areas. So, on top of the lawyer and barrister route, what we're saying is there are different ways you can actually go and different things you can do on top of the way we saw earlier. So, we see the normal wave we spoke about earlier. Alongside that, we have people who do law degrees and don't go on and do qualifying things in barrister route or solicitor route, but they might be in things like prevention and looking at how the police and the courts, etc., can prevent crime. There might be advice and analysing things as well. They might be trying to look at criminal justice reform that's out there and trying to find out what's going on with criminal justice and making it fairer while advising and analysing there as well. Some people want to go on and look after people in reform and rehabilitation. So we are a lot of people who might do law or criminology degrees who want to go on and work within the prison service, the psychology service, not psychology service, the NHS psychology wing, and actually, want to do these jobs to the side of the lawyer and solicitor route as well. And it is really wide ride that you might end up in. Obviously, normal routes might be police, very common that some people might do law and decide to go into the police. You might have people who want to work in the courts but not actually be a solicitor or barrister. You have the clerks, you have all the people working in there as well, the people who look after the prisoners downstairs. There's so many different jobs. If anyone on this call is really thinking of law and you are in year 12 or 13, you still have chance in your holidays to go and actually watch court cases. You can actually go into any court any day of the week, and around 2/3 of the cases are open for people to actually go and have a look around. So you can do that. And if you go on our website, we have a video on demand site where some of the talks go into what exactly you see happening in court, what each bit of the court are doing. And if you watch something like that before you go, you can really analyse what part of that whole system you might want to be if you want to be something to do with trials, those sort of things as well. So hope the next slide works in order for me. I'm just sorry, just trying to fix it. There we go. So possible careers in possible career routes. So you might look and be someone who wants to analyse law. You might be doing research for a public body. You might be an intelligence officer, GCHQ, MI5, things like that. Criminologists, academic wise, they analyse and analyse. I've worked with lots of criminologists over the years at many different universities, Professor David Wilson, people like that as well. And they are just fascinated by it. And you'll find their students might do their degree and actually just want to keep going and do a master's in that and then do a PhD research into those things. So again, they are out there. That's the sort of route you can think about, often ending up teaching the subjects they've learned so much about. You might want to be in prevention off the back of that analysis. So you might want to look at community development, cybercrime. You might want to work with the youth. You might be a project officer as well. There's lots of terrorism, radicalisation prevention out there as well. Youth workers, care workers, arrest referral workers, so many different roles out there. You might want to work in the area of advice. So you might be the person who actually works with a judge to actually figure out what sort of sentence people should get for what they're doing. They're out there, people doing sentencing guideline support. You might be looking at diversity reporting and looking at policy decisions. You might look at gender or socio-economic issues as well. So advice is very important within this system as well. And the other end of the scale is reform, checking that the system is fit for purpose and checking that we're constantly looking at it and looking through it as well. So people in those areas might work in the criminal justice agencies, the legal associate profession. There might be prison service officers, probation officers, drug rehabilitation or offenders, recovery workers. They are all out there as well. Next up, we've got a slide about a very sort of connected area in criminology in action, called Life is Hard. So this is sort of something to get you thinking about crime in action from the criminology side of things and then into the law side of things as well. So this is the situation as it on the screen. Sarah is a single mother of 3 and she lives in a very low income area. She works 2 jobs to make ends meet but struggles with childcare bills, which are very expensive, and keeping up with her actual bills, obviously with what we've got going on with the cost of living crisis as well. She's overwhelmed and she has no extended family to look after her. Recently, she's received notice she's behind on the rent and she's at risk of eviction. She feels like she had no other choice, but she stole from one of the offices she cleans for. Okay? So that's the situation. She's actually stolen something. So, first of all, the obvious question I hope you all can answer: do you think Sarah has committed a crime? Let me know in the chat what you think. Do you think she's committed a crime, or even your feelings about that overall? Just looking at the chat, see if anyone is coming in. Is everyone there? There we go. Yes, with mitigating factors. Thank you, Faye. Um, yes, a crime, but lenient for the reasoning. Yes. Okay, good. Good that you're growing on it. You're not just saying yes. You are sort of there, door, Dewey, sort of really sort of going. Look, we can't be too. You've done it, but you can't be too, you know, hard with that as well. Um, you know, she has challenges facing her. She's got financial stress, lack of childcare, lightly on top of all of this poor mental health, and that threat of losing her home as well. Are there any other reasons out there you think that she might be committing the crime? Do you think she's doing this um, because of her situation, or do you think she might be naturally have done this before? Is there any of that factoring in? What do people think? Just playing devil's advocate here for a moment. Okay, thank you, Harry. Yep, even though there are reasons a crime is a crime and still wrong, yes, absolutely. Um, anyone else got anything to add at this point? It's hard because I've only delivered this in a classroom, so I usually get a nice discussion going. It's harder in a chat box, isn't it? Um, but criminologists would look at this case and actually have theories coming out of it left, right, and centre. They would be looking at theories of like group influence and socialization. They focus on the immediate surroundings of the individual, their friends, their family, and in this case, a lack of support, a lack of friends, a lack of family might lead someone down this route. They might look at community theories. These focus on the effect of the community and geographic locations of the individual's upbringing, such as crime rates, school quality, and socio-economic status. So if they're looking at community theories, they might be looking at what they've seen over the years making crime normalized. Actually, they've seen it happen all the time. In certain areas of the country, that might be totally true. They might look at societal theories. These theories attribute the behaviour of society at large, rather than the immediate subject. So some people might actually, and the example I'm given here from our wonderful criminologist is they might look at Marxist conflict theory that suggests that poorer people are more likely to commit crime as a direct result of capitalism. Interesting take there, but again, that's what our criminologists came up with when we showed them this. But there is no single theory that can explain why people commit crime. That's why criminology is the other side of the coin to law. We know it's a crime, we know it's wrong, but why have they done it is looking at that biologically, psychologically, sociologically, and they often intertwine as well. Offending predicates is based on risk and protective factors. Each crime has different causes and risk factors. So, for example, education can play into thing, opportunities, family background, or lack of family background as well. So things that might influence Sarah's case, the sort of things that our criminologists have put up here is obviously. Oh, sorry, I'm jumped here a second. Sorry. So possible impact is analysis and advice, societal issues, um, prevention of this. So if we're looking at prevention as one of those things we saw in a previous slide, who could help prevent this? Would it be the police? Would it be community people? Would it be social workers? These are the sort of things you've got to think about in crime and as a wider area as well. So to go back and hope our next sort of part of my slides work properly this time. Here we go. So again, looking at crime prevention, we want to look at arresting and charging, evidence in court, intelligence service, and supporting the criminal justice reform. So again, this is what the police force brings to what we're doing. Okay, so the police force here, represented by their lovely hats that you don't see as often anymore. These are what they do. So first of all, they're meant to be there as a deterrent to crime. They are meant to stop people thinking about doing it. When they're in presence of people, people are going to do crime less. If they're not around, they could be around more. Bit of a thing that historically some people now say you don't see the beat Bobby anymore, and that's helped crime. Who knows at this point? They do the arresting and charging, of course, and then when it comes to court, they will give evidence in court as well. They're our intelligence service as well, believe it or not. So they're not just like your MO5s, your GCHQs, your government looking at things. They see things on the ground and they see trends sometimes before anyone else does. And so they might be feeding back of what they're getting and how they're doing it. And they will often be the people helping to support any reform that's happening. They might realise how unfair the system is to certain people and be trying to help with those reforms down the line. So we have another case here to go through. It's got the last case, I believe. So just so you know, because we're looking at time here. So imagine it. Jack is 16 and he was caught in a park with a small amount of cannabis in his pocket. He claims it's for medicinal use only and he has no prior offences on his record. So if you're a police officer, what would you have to take into consideration in this scenario? So in the type box, if you can, just give me a quick one. What would you be doing as a police officer in this scenario? Would you be able to consider the law about possession of drugs? Would you have ethical considerations? See what you think. Just drop me a little note in the box of any ideas that might come to mind. We're not going to linger on it for too long, this one, because I know we're running towards the end of time and there's going to be some questions at the end, hopefully. Any thoughts on how, as a police officer, you would deal with this? Especially the point he's making about medicinal use. Okay, thank you, everyone. So, yeah, there's an argument for medicinal use as prescribed. Uh, you know, he has no previous, no so good character, the medical reports, yeah. Based off the law unknown, they'll probably have to arrest him. Yeah, thank you, Liam, as well. Thanks for all those there. So, yes, again, a big thing to take into consideration. I'm not going to go into the full ins and outs because I'm looking at the time and just checking we don't want to overrun tonight. But yes, again, he would need to prove that. He would need to prove that it's for medicinal use, in which case he needs to show prescriptions, he needs to show all those sort of things as well. Only when I was reading this case myself a couple of months back that I realised that I often go on holiday with prescribed drugs. I never take my prescription part with me. And actually, I should be. Because if it was ever queried by another force in another country, I should be have to prove what I was taking, which is really, really interesting when you think about it as well, isn't it? So, yeah, that's another one just to think about as well. So we're going to skip over this one. Oh, no, hang on. So let's go on to the next slide. Sorry. Again, I'm having slide issues here. I'm really sorry. Um, so medicinal cannabis, very few people in England are very likely to get an NHS prescription. I know we saw in the chat there, someone says it can be prescribed but never has. It has, but it's very few people have as well. Drug penalties, you can get a fine or prison if you take drugs, carry drugs, make drugs, sell drugs. Especially, it can be up to 5 years in prison or unlimited fine or both. So how do you prove that you had this prescription? And as I said, keep it in its original packaging. The dispensing label that's on it should be shown as well. And if you can, keep the original prescription part that you're given back. You should always keep a copy of your prescription as well, if these sort of areas are long. And you might have to show ID that shows that you are the person alongside those as well. So usually I give 2 or 3 minutes to feedback. I'm going to go on to the next part now. Okay. So how do you become a police officer? We've just gone into the area of the police, a very wide area, something they're trying to majorly recruit for at the moment. You can go on to be a police officer using most degrees at the moment, but obviously the ones that are going to really, really, really help. The ones that help at the moment that you're probably going to see out there are things like law, criminology, or a lot of universities have started doing professional policing degrees or titles around that area. With us at ULaw, we do all of those. We do law by itself. You can do law with criminology. You can do criminology on its own. You can even do professional policing on its own. And on top of that, we even do a criminology and policing degree as well. So lots of options out there to think about. So they're all available to look at online. And our professional policing degree is about looking at professional knowledge of the ethics, skills, and attitudes that are critical to policing. So what can we do? So pre-joiner degree, you might want to look at the forces recruitment process. You do have to pass a search recruitment assessment centre to go into the police force. You do have to look at fitness and vetting checks. You might have to do some practical training along the way, depending on what area you're going to go into as well. Eventually, once you've got in those sort of degree, you've done the process and you join the force, you then obviously can go on and try and actually specialise in certain areas. Now, a lot of people do come to me on stands and try to talk about they want to be a detective, they want to do something in person, counter terrorism. Let's go over those quite quickly. If you do join the police force and you do eventually want to specialise, for example, to be a detective, you need to have at least 2 years minimum work experience as a police constable before you're even considered. And they look at applicants with leadership experience who can apply for that as well. There are some rare occasions where people can apply directly to inspector level training, but in general, they want people who have done 2 years work experience as a police constable. You might want to do a territorial support group. A lot of people want to do the dog support unit, and obviously general purpose dogs through seeking and tracking. They locate suspects, missing persons, evidence. We have explosive dogs in this country. We have victim recovery dogs as well. We have proactive and passive search dogs working around. We all might have seen during the pandemic that dogs were actually smelling people who had COVID. They are a very specialised unit again along the way. Some people like the idea of the mounted branch, which is horseback policing. They're both at planned or spontaneous disorders along the way. And also on top of that, there's counter-terrorism as well. So, other routes you can get into the degree with the policing as well. There is a direct police constable entry program that you can do as well that doesn't require you to study a degree during your probation. You can do a police constable degree apprenticeship. The apprenticeships are out there as well. Again, go and talk to the police about those whenever you can. They'll give you more information. And then on top of those, you can see the other options there, like Police Now graduate programs, which are 2-year entry routes specifically for graduates, including a National Detective Program. There's loads and loads of different routes out there for you to go ahead and look at as well. So I'm just going to start rounding up now because we've got about 10 minutes I want to leave for any questions that might be coming up as well. So at this point, I just wanted to put it in the chat box. Does anyone have any questions for me at all? I know it's been whistle stop, but it is quite a deep area. I hope it's a good introduction for you to get you thinking as well. And as you go through this pathway, hopefully we'll be able to go into some deeper areas, try and get some other talks organised as well. But right now, does anyone have any questions I want to ask in the chat box at all?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Yeah, please, students, if you do have any questions, pop those into the chat function. Thanks so much, Stephen. Just whilst we give time for students to pop those into there, it's been so helpful to hear some of those real life scenarios and just to really take into consideration all of the different careers, the different roles that are involved in some of those situations. Often we only really think about the solicitor, the barristers that are there, but there are so many different professionals that get involved in this sector. So I think that's really been great to highlight actually. We did have a couple of pre-questions if it would be helpful, or do you want to do that after your next step slide?
I was just going to put that up in the background as just something for
Okay.
people to read. No, if you want to
Lovely.
fire the questions away,
Yeah.
then we can do them.
So I think you've covered this already, though pretty much, but just to retouch on that, at university, is there just one law degree or are there specific types of law degrees? And I think pretty much you have covered that, but did you just want to touch on that again quickly?
Yes, so the LLB law is the most common. A lot of universities do the LLB law. You will find some universities do what we call joint honours alongside some other subjects. This is a bit of a pop quiz for everyone in the room. I usually ask this a question, but obviously no one can reply to me. But when you look at a degree title, you could have a joint honours degree, 2 subjects, and in the middle will be one of 2 words. They'll either be a with or an and. If you ever see a with, to anyone watching this, that is a joint honours that we call a major minor in American terms. So it's mainly the first one with others. So for example, you law do law with criminology, law with business, law with international business. That means most of your degree will be law with 20 to 25% of the other area. You might see an and in the middle, and that's a 50-50. Now, you probably won't see a law and degree that is an LLB, and that's something just to keep an eye out for. There are universities out there that do just bachelor's degree, BA, BSc in law, and that will not be accredited for you to go straight on the solicitor or barrister route. So that's why I kept using the word LLB repeatedly,
Yeah.
is to make sure that is the sort of route if you know you want to go down the direct law route.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really, really important thing to really drive home, because students who are wanting to go straight into that solicitor or barrister route do really need to be aware of getting onto the right course for them, which is the LLB, you pointed out so well. And it
Hmm.
can be really, really interesting to study a joint honours degree, or a subject with alongside something else, because we had another question which was relating to sort of forensic analysis. And I think actually a lot of students do want to combine those areas. But it's really important that if it is usually law with something, it's okay. But if it's law and, then it most likely may not well be an LLB. It can be. It's just worth looking into that,
Yeah,
isn't it?
definitely.
Um, we had a question about sort of apprenticeships as well, and I know that there was a section on that route, sort of map, that you showed. Students are very interested often in apprenticeships as well, and they're quite competitive, I would say, aren't they? At that sort of solicitor apprenticeship level. Do you have any other sort of information that you could give about that at all? Any guidance?
Yeah, I can give a brief overview. Solicitor apprenticeships are out there. A lot like degree apprenticeships, you don't go through the university to get them, even though us universities deliver apprenticeships. It's through the firm itself. So if anyone who's watching this wants to look at the solicitor apprenticeship route, you have to go to the solicitor firms directly and talk to them about how they all do it. And they all tend to do it slightly differently to each other. We have a lot of them who do it through University of Law. The general overview of a solicitor apprenticeship is it's 6.5 years in length. You are working roughly 4 days a week, doing your lectures 1 day a week, and then some reading and writing of the weekend. So it is intense. Obviously, the benefits are you're getting the qualification without the perceived debt, even though I don't like the word debt. It's a student loan, a graduate contribution system, but it is hard work. And the other thing to really think about with solicitor apprenticeship, it means that while you're at sixth form, you need to know what type of law you want to work with the firm. So you might have to work with a family law firm. If after 3 years you decide you don't like family law and you've been on the solicitor apprenticeship, that's quite hard. So the guidance I give completely impartially to students is when looking at the law routes, if you are thinking of being a solicitor, hedge your bets and make sure you are still doing your UCAS, you're still doing your student finance forms, because we see a record number of students get into results day and thinking they're going to get an apprenticeship, and actually they end up going to uni without everything filled in. So they are out there. Just do your research. Our website, again, really good resource. Lots of videos for people to watch about those
Mm.
routes too.
Yeah, thank you. And Jane will put some links on for different for your university with some help. So that will be really helpful. I think the point you make is a really, really good one. We find that students, when you're studying law, you're able to have that very broad sort of grounding in all of the different areas that you might want to consider, and time to really figure that out. With an apprenticeship, it's absolutely fantastic for giving you really specialized sort of training straight away. You're going straight into that area that you might very well want to stay within, but it can be a little bit more tricky to move away from that if you actually decide that that's not right for you. And it can be very difficult to figure that out before you've even done any work experience, which can be really, really difficult to find for the law, because oftentimes you need to be over 18. So yeah, they are difficult sort of to find and to decide whether they're the right thing for you. I mean, I would just say that myself and Lou Harper, the other careers advisor here at the college, we can certainly help to discuss both options. So if students did want to come in and have a chat with us, they certainly can. And in terms of work experience, we can provide sort of, some guidance. And Jane, my colleague, she can give you hints and tips about where to find work experience. Do you find that the Uni of Law has a good sort of connection with a lot of employers and helps students when they're there to be able to create those opportunities? Because that is so important, isn't it, during your law studies as well?
Yeah, I think that goes back to one of the very first points in the talk, that over 90% of our tutors have been a solicitor or barrister, or still are. And that means we have connections inside the whole legal network. We are known
Mm.
within that area as well. That means that people who are working in those firms at some point in their life decide to come and work for us, which shows the way they respect us and train through us as well. We were the original sort of provider of solicitor and barrister routes. So That's our core, really. Obviously, we have gone out and done criminology and things like that, but yeah, absolutely, we are there to
Yeah.
support. And from my background of watching people in apprenticeships, it is a really, really good way with us because of our online campus as well. So you can be working for a firm in the middle of Wales, and you can still do
Mm.
your apprenticeship with us because we can do it through the internet, which is
Yeah.
amazing compared to having to travel to Birmingham or Manchester or London.
Absolutely, very interesting. And I like the thing that you said very early on is, you know, the option to transfer to London, perhaps as you go through your course is quite an interesting one because, you know, there's a lot of, I mean, Birmingham's fantastic for law firms, but again, a lot more perhaps opportunities for international law firms in London, and that networking is really important in this business, isn't it,
Yeah,
really?
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that's great. We haven't had any more questions in the chat, so
Cool.
you've covered everything perfectly well, Stephen. So appreciate that so much. We will start to wrap this up then, but thank you so much for your time, Stephen. I think that's been a really useful session for our students. Here's Lou. She's made a fashionably late entrance. It's great to
I
see you,
have.
Lou.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? I'm on jury
Yes.
service at the moment, so at the cutting edge. And one of the things I would just add to what you've said, actually, Stephen, is that the work experience is so important. And actually going and seeing the courts in operation you mentioned, I think having spent on my third week there at the moment, it's actually really key to see some of those roles. It's really interesting to understand the roles, the different kind of responsibilities, but also the different skills that are needed, those soft skills as well as that work experience. So I think it's building that. And you mentioned in that last slide, you know, building all of those things into for year 12s to really look at. And I would say that how important that is, but also seeing things like the forensics, digital media forensics, and all sorts of other things combined, you know, into, and the policing as well, combined into making the law work in all its aspects. So, you know, actually that was really interesting. I'm sorry to just step in, but that was absolutely great. I was listening in the background to most of that. So thank you.
Cheers.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much, Lou. And thank you, Stephen, and all of our students and parents, if they're watching as well, who've joined us. We will stop the recording shortly. We'll circulate that round afterwards to everybody who's attended and those who couldn't as well. But we appreciate it, Stephen, and good luck in your next role. We'll be seeing you again soon, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thanks, Stephen.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.